Right, so we continue in this lecture 10 with the governing equations, and I move on to now looking at application of Newton's second law of motion to a fluid particle. So my learning objectives of this 10th lecture are we will look at linear momentum equation, how we will apply it directly for a fluid particle, and from there on there will be discussions on constitutive laws for fluids, and we will introduce to you the idea of Newtonian fluids, and to conclude we will then finalize our mathematical model for viscous flows. So to start with Newton's second law, I have a general inertial frame of reference. Remember, in Newton's law, this is a very essential requirement. So you have an inertial observer or frame of reference, and there is a fluid motion going on, and I identify, or you can say I just focus my attention on a single particle. Now you can see that whatever hard work we have already done as far as expressing forces on a fluid particle and all, they will be just directly applied, and we can just derive the momentum equation very fast and very efficiently. So writing down the Newton's second law, so we have the statement mass into acceleration of the particle is equal to the resultant external force acting on the fluid particle. So external force again will be, as you can see, we have already categorized them into body forces and surface forces. So mass of the particle is written as density times the volume, and the acceleration of the particle is material derivative of velocity. So the left hand side is pretty clear. So on the right hand side we already have the model. How do we write the body force? We write it as density times the intensity, or because the body force is due to some external force field, so that force field is expressed as an intensity per unit mass. So you take the mass of the particle, rho times delta V multiplied by the intensity, so that gives you the body force on the particle. And we already know the divergence of the stress tensor at that point where the particle is. If you multiply by delta V, it gives you the surface force on the particle. So you see, all the hard work that we have done by now is now paying rich dividends, and we are also taking advantage of the particle approach, because particle approach allows you the most direct application of basic laws. No Reynolds transport theorem, nothing, Gauss laws and all, nothing is needed actually here. So finally I have an equation of motion which we call as Cauchy's equation of motion. Okay, Cauchy was the applied mathematician who gave this equation for the first time by applying Newton's second law. So we have this equation, rho times dv dt, material derivative, that is equal to rho b plus divergence of sigma. By now the physical meaning of each term by the very nature of the derivation should be very clear. Right, now just to remind me that this body force is per unit mass intensity, I have just introduced a subscript m. Okay, ये subscript m जो है ये हमें help करेगा remind कराने में कि ये body force intensity per unit mass basis पे है. And that's why I also would like to remind my students and myself also that dv dt, or the acceleration of the particle, must be with respect to an inertial observer. So that's why I attach these subscripts now, and I finalize this equation as governing equation 2. Okay, so remember the mass conservation gave me continuity equation in non-conservative form, which was governing equation 1. So I would like to summarize them at the end, so that's why I am labeling them in this manner, and it is also helpful in the course also too, so that you can refer to these equations anytime. Now there are some important remarks on this equation G.2. So Cauchy's equation of motion applies, first of all, it applies to any fluid particle at any point in flow domain and at any instant of time. Okay. Second is what does it involve? what kind of flow variables does it have. So you remember continuity has density and velocity as the flow variables. Now in this case, the continuity, the same flow variables, density and velocity, are present in G.2, and in addition to that, density and velocity, I also have the stress tensor as the flow variable. Now remember, velocity has 3 components and stress tensor has 6 independent components. Of course, the components are 9, but because the stress tensor is symmetric, so it means there are only 6 independent components of a stress tensor. So remember this always, 6. So you need to count them as 6 variables, not 9. Okay. So I have these flow variables. This is important, as I will show later on, why we want to keep track of the flow variables involved in my basic equations, why we are tracking them. You will soon see that. Now the third point is that this is a vector equation. So we look at the mathematical side of the thing. So this is a vector equation like any momentum equation, and has in general 3 scalar components. So when you count the number of equations represented by G.2, you should see that actually it is not 1 but 3 equations. Okay. Continuity or G.1 is just a scalar equation, so it's 1. It is counted as 1. But this G.2 should be counted as 3 equations. Right. Now, what happens when we are forced to work with some non-inertial moving frames? So let's look at the scenario in general. This is my 4th important remark. So here I have now, and you have a non-inertial frame which is shown as M, non-inertial observer M, and the 3 directions 1, 2, 3. And this observer M is moving with respect to a fixed or an inertial frame of reference I, and it is having some general state of motion M. So that's why it has got both things, the translatory acceleration a m with respect to I, as well as some rotation omega. So both are shown vectorially, a mi and omega. So remember, these are the states of motion of the non-inertial observer M or frame with respect to the inertial frame. So we have already learned in our earlier courses in rigid body mechanics, and possibly if you go back right up to first year level, you might have, if you will be able to recall, you might have done a relation between inertial and non-inertial frames there, and I use this same relation here. So my fluid motion is being observed with respect to my non-inertial moving frame M. So I have a particle which is instantaneously at some position vector Rm, and it has a velocity Vm. Now if I want to write the acceleration of this particle, rather I want to relate the acceleration of this particle in the 2 frames of reference, inertial and the moving frame. So I will relate it with the help of the expression dv dt. I should be the acceleration as seen from the inertial observer, and this is having 4 extra terms, a mi d omega dt cross rm plus 2 omega cross vm plus omega cross rm plus the acceleration seen by the moving observer. So it means that the acceleration of the particle as seen by the moving observer, which is nothing but the material derivative of the velocity in that frame, moving frame. So that's why it's written dv dt m. So the 2 accelerations dv dt I and dv dt m, the difference is arising because of these 4 terms. AMI, which is translatory acceleration of the moving observer with respect to the inertial observer, d omega dt cross rm. So this is due to the variation in omega of the moving observer, which is also known as the tangential acceleration. Then the third term is 2 omega cross Vm. This is what we call as the Coriolis term, or the Coriolis acceleration. This is due to the misalignment between the velocity of the particle as seen from the moving frame with the rotation vector of the moving frame with respect to the inertial observer. And the last term, last extra term rather, is omega cross Rm, which is the centripetal term, centripetal acceleration term. So these are the 4 additional accelerations that you get due to the motion of the non-inertial frame with respect to the inertial observer. All these are because if suppose for example the inertial frame is only translating, no rotation, non-inertial frame is only translating and there is no rotation as seen by the inertial observer, then the 3 terms involving omega will all drop to 0 and we will only have AMI term. Most commonly used is the case of steady rotation in most engineering applications. So if you are having steady rotation only and no translatory motion of the non-inertial frame with respect to the inertial observer, then AMI is 0 and the second term d omega dt for steady rotation is also 0, and so you are left with only the Coriolis term and the centripetal term. So anyway, all these variations you can easily follow or track once you know this general expression. So finally I have written down the expression that dv dt with respect to inertial frame must be equal to dv dt in the moving frame, general moving frame, and these 4 extra terms, which are the extra acceleration terms. So if you remember this 4th remark that I am making, which allows you to express the acceleration of the particle in the general non-inertial moving frame in terms of the allows you to express this acceleration and relate it to an inertial observer which is required for the Newton's second law, then even if you are using a non-inertial moving frame, you can substitute in the equation g.2 on the left dv dt di as equal to the right hand side. Okay, so that means if you substitute dv dt I and g.2 with the help of this non-inertial frame relation, then you will get the equation, linear momentum equation for a non-inertial moving frame, because then all the terms are involving like Rm, Vm, dv dt, m, all these flow related terms, they only are involving the moving non-inertial frame. So this is point number 4, which is important for handling non-inertial moving frames. So what is the usage? Let us look at that. Brief hint on where we will be using this in engineering practice. When we analyze fluid flow through rotating components of machines like turbines, compressors, so turbine blades, they are all rotating, compressor blades all rotating, and there are other rotating machinery, important fluid rotating machinery, fans, blowers and all. So you can propellers. So basically all these are rotating members and flow takes place through them. So if you want to analyze flow through them, the most convenient choice is the frame attached to these rotating components, so it becomes a non-inertial frame, and therefore the momentum equation must be written accordingly. Similarly, if you are analyzing atmospheric and oceanic flows which are influenced by Earth's rotation, then even the Earth fixed frame, which you normally take as inertial, has to be treated as a non-inertial frame, because the rotation of the Earth is something which is influencing these flows. So that's why you treat the Earth fixed frame as a non-inertial frame and use a sort of a imaginary inertial frame to relate the 2 accelerations and then write the linear momentum equation. The other examples of non-inertial or accelerating frames of reference are when we are analyzing, let's say, fluid which is contained in accelerating containers. I believe you did this in your earlier fluid mechanics course also, but there you had neglected this aspect, what we call as the fluid sloshing. What is sloshing? When we have a container and it accelerates, then for a brief interval of time the fluid actually moves with respect to the accelerating container. In fact, it moves in an unsteady manner and there are some sort of oscillations and waves being set up inside the container. So these setting up of waves and oscillations inside the accelerating container is what we call as the fluid sloshing. And if you want to analyze this sloshing, because it leads to some very large unsteady forces on the walls of the container, so that's why it's of engineering importance. So you would like to use a non-inertial frame. Okay, so all these are some hints of application areas of non-inertial moving frames, general non-inertial moving frames, and their usage. So now to summarize what we have done so far, the flows are governed by basic laws of classical physics like mass conservation, momentum equation, and even, let's say, if we continue further, first law of thermodynamics, and so on. So I mean, first law of thermodynamics would be needed if you are dealing with flows with the heat transfer, because then the temperature variations are to be considered in the fluid flow. So all those things are being must be they will be taught in your heat transfer course, which is of course running in parallel. So I'm not aware whether the fluid energy equation has been covered there or not by now, but surely it will be covered in due course of time. So we will not be dealing with first law and all such things. We will be only dealing with isothermal flows in our the scope of our course. So, but just to give you an idea that basically you can continue with physical laws that you are having in classical physics, you can apply them and you can develop the equations in the manner like we have done for mass conservation and momentum equation. Okay, second point that I want to make in my summary is that the physical laws can be applied directly on a fluid particle to obtain equations in non-conservative form. So this we have noticed for the momentum equation also, okay, that we can derive physical laws directly on a fluid particle to obtain equations in non-conservative form. The third important summarization is the incompressible homogeneous flow scenario, which we have already talked about earlier. So the incompressible homogeneous flow scenario is that I've indicated in brackets, del dot V must be 0 and rho is a constant, rho naught. So the governing equations G.1 and G.2 in this case would involve only velocity and stress tensor as flow variables, because density drops out because of the homogeneous flow idea. So now 3 components of velocity and 6 components, as I said, independent of the stress tensor are there. So there are a total of 9 quantities present in as far as G.1 and G.2 are concerned. I have shown it below. G.1 has one flow variable, G.1 is one equation and it's a scalar equation, and it has velocity involved, so 3 components of velocity, and but the number of equations, if we are counting, G.1 is 1 and G.2, which is a vector equation, as I said, it should be not seen as a single equation, but actually it's a vector equation, right? So basically we have 3 equations. So if I sum up G.1 and G.2, I have 4 equations. So what I am seeing here is that I have less number of equations and I have 9 quantities that are being involved in these 4 equations. So 9 quantities and 4 equations. So you remember that अगर आप कोई भी mathematical problem की बात करते हैं, we have learned a basic fact in mathematics that there should be as many equations as the number of unknowns or the number of quantities that we are trying to solve. Okay, now in fluid flows the number of unknowns must be always very carefully counted, and they should be balanced off against the number of equations, because unless you do it, your mathematical model of the fluid flow is incomplete. It will be a partial model. Okay, so that's why I am showing that even for a simple incompressible homogeneous flow, if I were to count the number of equations, that is G.1 and G.2, they are just 4 equations, and they involve a total of 9 quantities. Okay, so remember this. So it means even for flows without heat transfer, यानी अभी मैंने टेम्परेचर वगैरह की तो बात ही नहीं करी है. So even for flows without heat transfer, the number of flow variables are 9 and the number of equations are 4. So it means that if I just use G.1 and G.2, it won't constitute a mathematically complete model of the fluid flow. This viscous incompressible homogeneous flow model is incomplete. Okay, if I just use G.1 and G.2. So partially complete model is there with us. So that means something has to be done extra. We have to find more equations so that our model eventually gets complete. That means I balance off the number of flow variables that I have in the equations and with the number of equations. So there are two things, number of equations and number of flow variables involved in those equations. So the two things should match. Okay, क्या मैच करना चाहिए? जितने इक्वेशंस आपके पास हैं और उन इक्वेशंस में जितने अननोन वेरिएबल्स हैं वो बराबर होने चाहिए. अगर ऐसा होगा तभी आप एक यूनिक सोल्यूशन, then and only then you can expect a unique solution of the problem. Okay, otherwise the problem is not going to have a unique solution. So that's the end of the story as far as linear momentum equation is concerned. So we have come to a stage where we have made a progress, we have more equations now, but in the process of getting more equations we have also introduced extra and more variables also. So we need to add some more equations and see if we can eventually strike a balance, eventually reach a balance or strike a balance. So this is where the role of constitutive relations starts to show up actually. So let's start discussing constitutive relations now. What are these constitutive relations? These are basically relations between the stress tensor and the strain rate tensor. Okay, to put it very simply, because you are now very familiar with what is strain rate tensor. You already have seen the strain rate tensor component relations with respect to the velocity gradients. So we now know that if fluid particle velocities are there and you then use them to evaluate the stress tensor or evaluate the strain rate tensor components, so you get the strain rate tensor, right? And this strain rate tensor, we are now talking of its relation with the stress components or stress tensor rather. So constitutive relations provide the missing equations to develop the complete mathematical model for viscous flows, as I said earlier. So they provide you those extra relations. Okay, so let us look at how to move forward from here for a general viscous flow, how the constitutive relations are developed. Let us go into a little bit background. So for example, if I first start looking at what is the stress state in the absence of viscosity or its effects. Okay, so अगर viscosity या उसके effects ना हो तो किस तरह की stress state fluid में होती है, let us try to look at that, and this we have already learnt in our earlier course in fluid mechanics. जो आपका second year वाला course था उसमें already ये stress state बताई गई है. So we have already learned in our course on fluid mechanics, earlier course on fluid mechanics, that in a state of rest or of uniform motion, तो देखिए चाहे फ्लूइड रेस्ट पे हो या यूनिफॉर्म मोशन हो, वो तो मेनली ऑब्जर्वर की बात है. अगर यूनिफॉर्म मोशन में है, सो आई कैन ऑलवेज हैव अ observer which is moving with the same velocity, so the fluid will be brought to rest in that frame. So state of rest या uniform motion is just a matter of observer. Okay, so they are basically the same from the point of view of physics. So the stress tensor in this state at a point is isotropic. We already know this. Isotropic का क्या मतलब है कि stress tensor की state जो है वो कुछ इस तरह की होती है, what we have written mathematically, that it is sigma delta ij ei cap ej cap, and which basically means that I can write it in terms of sigma and the identity tensor. Okay, so all these are by now familiar to you, identity tensor and all these notations, so I don't need to discuss them. तो आइसोट्रॉपी का मतलब यह है कि अगर आप एक पॉइंट लेते हैं, इफ यू आर एट अ पॉइंट एंड यू टेक अ टाइनी एरिया एट एनी एंगल ओरिएंटेड विद रिस्पेक्ट टू द कोऑर्डिनेट डायरेक्शंस पासिंग थ्रू द पॉइंट, then whatever may be the area orientation, it doesn't matter. If you are at a fixed point and you choose a tiny area which is oriented with respect to the coordinate directions at any angle, the stress is always normal to the area and its value remains the same. So isotropy means this, that the stress is always normal to the area, whatever be the orientation of the area or the tiny or infinitesimal area that you consider at a point with respect to coordinate axis, and not only it is normal but it has the same magnitude. So that's why that magnitude is written as sigma. Okay, so any isotropic tensor mathematically is written as its value, magnitude, sigma times the identity tensor. Okay, if you expand this, it will look like sigma epsilon 1 plus sigma epsilon 2 plus sigma epsilon 3 because of the Kronecker delta ij. Okay, now further we learned in that course itself, earlier course, that this value sigma is equal to negative of the thermodynamic pressure P. Okay, sigma is equal to minus P. ये भी हमने earlier course में देख रखा है. And why minus? Because we were told that the stress is always compressive. Okay, so एक fluid particle सब तरफ से compress हो रहा होता है in a state of rest or of uniform motion by this value. So जो stress है उसका चूंकि tensile positive लिया जाता है from the side of the surroundings, तो compressive जो है वो minus लेना होगा, और thermodynamic pressure is never negative, remember. So that's why the two are related with a minus sign. Okay, right. So finally my the isotropic stress tensor in case of fluid at rest or of uniform motion is simply minus P and the identity tensor. Now this what we have already known for the fluid at rest or in a state of uniform motion, we build our general idea of stress for fluids in motion where viscous effects have to be included. Okay, so now we start talking of constitutive relations with viscous effects included. Okay, so it is reasonable to argue that when the fluid is in motion, the viscous effects are superimposed on the isotropic stress tensor as an additional viscous stress tensor. Okay, so this is important. What we argue that जो हमारा जनरल विस्कस फ्लूइड मोशन जब हो रहा है उस वक्त जो स्ट्रेस टेंसर होगा वो बेसिकली हमारा जो एट रेस्ट फ्लूइड एट रेस्ट या यूनिफॉर्म मोशन का जो स्ट्रेस टेंसर है आइसोट्रोपिक, उस पे एक एडिशनल स्ट्रेस की तरह सुपर इंपोज होगा, विस्कस स्ट्रेस टेंसर जिसको हम बोल रहे हैं. ओके, सो वी विल हैव सम एडिशनल वैल्यूज getting superimposed on the stress state which was existing when the fluid was at rest or in a state of uniform motion. So ये reasonable है, because once the fluid is moving, viscous effects will tend to introduce additional stresses over and above the stresses which were existing when the fluid was at rest or in a state of uniform motion. So now, I can just notionally write sigma tensor is the sum of the two stress tensors, and deliberately to remind me that the additional stress tensor is due to viscous effects, so I have written with a superscript V. Okay, viscous stress tensor. Now we can start talking of the relations between viscous stress tensor and the strain rate tensor in a moving fluid. Okay, so when the fluid is moving, we know that there are local deformation rates and you have the strain rate tensor. So how that strain rate tensor is in general related to the viscous stress tensor. So now these relations are something very very unique to the type of fluid that you are dealing with. इन टर्म्स ऑफ सॉलिड्स अगर मैं बात करूं तो जैसे सॉलिड्स में आपने स्ट्रेस स्ट्रेन रिलेशंस आप जानते हैं, आपने पढ़ी हैं, उसमें काफी पॉपुलर है हुक्स लॉ. ओके, सो यू हैव अ हुकियन सॉलिड यू कैन से विच ओबेज द हुक्स लॉ. सो वो स्पेसिफिक रिलेशंस है, वो मटेरियल की कैरेक्टरिस्टिक है, राइट. सो यहाँ पे भी जो आपकी कॉन्स्टिट्यूटिव रिलेशंस हैं उनको कॉन्स्टिट्यूटिव इसीलिए बोला जा रहा है बिकॉज दे आर inherent and intrinsic, they are intrinsic relations or intrinsic properties of the fluid under consideration. So it's like a material characteristic. So we find that you can broadly classify fluids into two types, viscous and viscoelastic. Okay, now what do we mean by viscous and viscoelastic? I have written it down. For viscous fluids, the viscous stress tensor is a function of strain rate tensor in general and time. Okay, so this is the most general relation that I can say for viscous fluids. What is that? The viscous stress tensor is a function of strain rate tensor and time. But for viscoelastic fluids, the viscous stress tensor is a function of strain rate tensor, time, as well as strain. So it's like a history, it remembers its history. That's why the strain is important. Okay, so ये एक ऐसा फ्लूइड है जिसमें थोड़ा सा इलास्टिक नेचर भी है, because if it was a pure fluid then it should be a function of only strain rate and time, but it is not just a function of strain rate and time. In addition to this, strains are also getting involved, just like a elastic solid. Okay, so that's why the word viscoelastic, क्योंकि strain rate और strain दोनों involved हैं viscous stress tensor की relation में, तो that's why we call such a fluid as viscoelastic. So anyway, viscoelastic is a very advanced kind of a scenario and it is not going to be dealt with in our course. So after introducing it, I will hardly be talking about viscoelastic fluids in my course. So I just have introduced you from the general perspective, but we move on with the viscous fluids. Now viscous fluids, as I have pointed out, because there is a possibility of time dependence, so again we can put them into two categories, time dependent and time independent. Okay, time independent is very obvious. The viscous stress tensor is a function of strain rate tensor only, not a function of time. And these time independent fluids can be further classified as Newtonian and non-Newtonian. So the entire tree is now, if you start the tree from fluids, you first put them in two categories, viscous and viscoelastic. Then viscous is further split into time dependent and time independent, and the time independent is further split into Newtonian and non-Newtonian. So what are Newtonian fluids? Newtonian fluids means that these relations between the viscous stress tensor and the strain rate tensor, they are linear in character. Okay, so just like Hooke solids, okay, Hookean solids, we have Newtonian fluids. If I were to draw an analogy with these solids, so Stokes first proposed these relations, so that's why they are known as Stokes relations. Because I am dealing with the tensor relations, so I will write them component wise. So sigma ij viscous stress tensor components on the left, so sigma ijv is equal to Stokes ने जैसे propose किया, so he proposed it with the help of two coefficients, one is lambda and one is mu, and the relation is lambda volumetric strain rate Kronecker delta ij plus 2 mu and components of the strain rate tensor Sij. So lambda EV delta ij plus 2 mu Sij. Sij are the components of the strain rate tensor. So these relations were first given by Stokes, and these are linear relations. Linear क्यों है? Because they are linearly related to the components of strain rate tensor. Remember ये जो volumetric strain rate था, it was found as S11 plus S22 plus S33. So जो आपका strain rate tensor है उसके diagonal जो components होते हैं S11, S22, S33, वो उन्हीं को सम करके वॉल्यूमेट्रिक स्ट्रेन रेट आता है. तो सब सारी राइट हैंड साइड पे अगर आप देखें, विजुलाइज करें, तो खाली स्ट्रेन रेट टेंसर के ही कंपोनेंट्स हैं. दो आई हैव रिटन इट एज एप्सिलॉन वी, बट एप्सिलॉन वी इटसेल्फ इज हाउ इट इज फाउंड, इट इज द सम ऑफ द S11 plus S22 and plus S33. The strain rate components का sum है वो भी certain components का. So therefore eventually what is on the right is only strain rate tensor components. So what are these two property coefficients that Stokes introduced? One is mu, which is known as first coefficient of viscosity, and lambda, it is known as the second coefficient of viscosity. So as far as the general relation is concerned for Newtonian fluids, Stokes introduced it for the first time with two coefficients. Later on he was able to also state some relation between lambda and mu that we will also have a look at towards the end of the lecture. But for the time being, these are two material coefficients which are known as first and second coefficients of viscosity. Okay, right. Now if I use this component relation, I can just write them for specific values of I and j. So for example, sigma 11, sigma 22, sigma 33, I have directly written them here. So 2 mu S11 plus lambda EV, 2 mu S22 plus lambda EV, and 2 mu S33 plus lambda EV. These are sigma 11, sigma 22 and sigma 33 viscous stress tensor components. Now the other components, sigma 12V, sigma 13V and sigma 23V will look like this. Okay, they will be just related to the strain rate tensor components as 2 mu S12, 2 mu S13 and 2 mu S23. Now what you have to notice that the viscous stress tensor, okay, not only the total stress tensor, but you must notice that the relations, ये जो Stokes की relations हैं, इन्हीं की बात कर रहे हैं. Notice that the relations preserve the symmetry of the viscous stress tensor. Because ये viscous stress tensor जो है, ये इस तरह से relation लिखी गई है कि viscous stress tensor भी symmetric ही आता है निकल के. आप देख सकते हैं, because even if I interchange sigma 21 V, it will come out as 2 mu S21, and S21 is same as S12. So it means that sigma 12 V, viscous sigma 12 is same as sigma 21 V. So therefore you can readily notice that these relations preserve the symmetry in the viscous stress tensor. So not only the total stress tensor is symmetric in fluids at all points and all times, the viscous stress tensor for Newtonian fluids, the way we have written it and the way Stokes proposed these relations, the same symmetry is basically existing for the viscous stress tensor also. So it means as far as the viscous stress tensor is concerned, I should again visualize this having 6 independent unknowns. Okay, क्योंकि symmetry है इसलिए 9 independent नहीं है, 9 है components, that's fine, but उसमें से 6 ही independent है. That means if you know the value of 6, that allows you to write down the value of the entire tensor because it's symmetric. Right. So now since we have written down the viscous stress tensor, so going back and writing down the total stress tensor for a Newtonian fluid, we just have to add the rest isotropic value जो आपकी at rest थी, when the fluid was at rest or in a state of uniform motion, उसको simply add कर देना है इसमें additional viscous stress tensor में to get the total stress tensor. So minus pi identity tensor is added, and so I have this result. So this Newtonian fluids के लिए this can be the most general relation between the stress at a point for Newtonian fluids and strain rate at a point. Of course, if the fluid is not moving, then strain rate tensor components are all 0 and volumetric strain rate is also 0, and you get back the same state of rest isotropic tensor. So G.3 is a very consistent relation. So that's why I put it in a box and I call this as my third relation, which is basically a constitutive relation. So remember this, G.3 is a constitutive relation. So now this relation, again being a tensor relation, ये आपको 6 independent relations देगा, because for each component you can write one relation. So G.3 should be taken as not one equation but 6 equations. Okay, so thus the above strain rate relations for a Newtonian fluid can be regarded as the most general form of constitutive relations for a Newtonian fluid. And we can, as I have told you, we can write the volumetric strain rate as sum of the strain rate components S11, S22 and S33. So symbolically we can write it using the double subscript S, K, K and sum over K. So summation, as I said, if the index is repeating, and since K is a repeating index, so I can just remove the summation sign and summation over K can be implied. Okay, so the volumetric strain rate can be simply written as SKK. And now I can just put it back in my G.3 and I get G.3 dash, where only the volumetric strain rate is written as SKK. So G.3 or G.3 dash is just a matter of just replacing the volumetric strain rate in terms of strain rate tensor components, because you only want to see strain rate tensor components on the right. Okay, so stress, total stress is finally related to the pressure, thermodynamic pressure and the strain rate tensor components, if you would like to view this relation in this manner. So it means that I have added 6 more equations, and strain rate tensor does not introduce any new variable, because remember strain rate tensor is in terms of velocity gradients. So only velocity ही उसमें आ रहा है, तो velocity आपका continuity में भी है, G.1 में भी है, G.2 में भी है. So therefore it's not a new variable in G.3 or 3 dash. New variable इसमें what is the new variable? Thermodynamic pressure P. So one new variable has been added now. तो वो जो 9 की हमारी लिस्ट थी या हमने जो भी हम काउंट कर रहे हैं G.1 और G.2 से नंबर ऑफ अननोन्स, तो वो हमने जो 6 एडिशनल इक्वेशन लिए हैं उसमें एक अननोन और ऐड हो गया है, विच इज थर्मोडायनेमिक प्रेशर. नाउ नोटिस समथिंग वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग. इफ द फ्लो इज इनकम्प्रेसिबल, अगर आप एक इनकम्प्रेसिबल फ्लो देख रहे हैं तो आपका वॉल्यूमेट्रिक स्ट्रेन रेट 0 होगा. एंड फॉर दैट G.3 और G.3 डैश कैन बी सिंप्लीफाइड टू सिग्मा tensor is equal to minus P identity tensor plus 2 mu strain rate tensor. So there is no role of lambda in this relation. So incompressible flow में जो second coefficient of viscosity है lambda, Stokes ने जो इंट्रोड्यूस किया था, उसका कोई रोल नहीं है, उसको जानने की भी जरूरत नहीं है. In fact it doesn't exist for the case of incompressible flows. Okay, so there is only one coefficient of viscosity which we also call as dynamic viscosity, और उसी का रोल है खाली इनकम्प्रेसिबल फ्लो में. नाउ फॉर अ जनरल, हाउएवर फॉर अ जनरल विस्कस फ्लो ऑफ अ न्यूटोनियन फ्लूइड, अगर इनकम्प्रेसिबल आप नहीं ले रहे हैं तो फिर आपका वॉल्यूमेट्रिक टर्म 0 नहीं होगा, और द आइसोट्रॉपिक स्ट्रेस इज नाउ मॉडिफाइड बाय दिस टर्म लैम्डा एप्सिलॉन बी, सो दैट द आइसोट्रॉपिक विस्कस टेंसर इन द केस ऑफ जनरल विस्कस फ्लो, रिमेंबर हाइड्रोस्टैटिक में तो माइनस पी आई था, लेकिन चूंकि अब आपका एक विस्कस फ्लो हो रहा है न्यूटोनियन फ्लूइड का, तो फिर आपका जो द न्यू आइसोट्रॉपिक विस्कस टेंसर, जो मुझे कहना चाहिए आइसोट्रॉपिक विस्कस टेंसर, वो आपका मतलब विस्कस फ्लो में, दैट्स व्हाई आई एम राइटिंग इट एज वी. इसमें सिंपली वी लिखने का मतलब ये है कि जब एक विस्कस फ्लो न्यूटोनियन फ्लूइड का हो रहा है तो आपका जो टोटल आइसोट्रॉपिक स्ट्रेस टेंसर है वो माइनस पी प्लस लैम्डा एप्सिलॉन वी या माइनस पी प्लस लैम्डा एस के ऑफकोर्स द आइडेंटिटी टेंसर, ये बन जाता है. सो दिस इज द मॉडिफाइड आइसोट्रॉपिक टेंसर फॉर विस्कस फ्लोज. अगेन फॉर इनकम्प्रेसिबल फ्लो, इंटरेस्टिंगली ये एस के टर्म ड्रॉप आउट हो जाएगा, 0 हो जाएगा, एंड यू हैव द सेम आइसोट्रॉपिक टेंसर. Even though the fluid is moving, it is viscous, but the isotropic part remains the same as if the fluid was उसका जो फॉर्म है वो वही है. ऑफ कोर्स इसका ये मतलब नहीं है कि जो प्रेशर है थर्मोडायनेमिक वो वही रहेगा जो कि मोशन में है या एट रेस्ट है. ऑफ कोर्स वो बदल जाएगा. अगर फ्लूइड एट रेस्ट पे है तो उसका हाइड्रोस्टैटिक प्रेशर कुछ और होगा हर पॉइंट पे, और जब मूव करेगा तो प्रेशर की वैल्यू बदल जाएगी. सो ये कहना सही नहीं होगा कि isotropic stress will remain the same. It will not remain the same, only the form is same. Okay, so for incompressible flow you can say that the form of the isotropic stress tensor, और या जो mathematical उसका जो form है, that is the same which exists when the fluid is at rest or in a state of uniform motion. तो यूनिफॉर्म मोशन या स्टेट ऑफ रेस्ट में जो उसकी फॉर्म है मैथमेटिकल आइसोट्रोपिक स्ट्रेस की, वो सेम है इनकम्प्रेसिबल फ्लो से. दैट इज व्हाट द मीनिंग इज. Okay, now let's quickly go on to finally try to close off this discussion on constitutive behavior. Stokes hypothesis on lambda. तो मैंने जैसा बताया था कि later on Stokes ने lambda के ऊपर कुछ वर्क करके उसको उसकी वैल्यू के ऊपर कुछ सजेशन दिया था कि what value we should take for lambda. So the Stokes hypothesis in a very brief and nutshell form, because हमारे कोर्स में वो out of scope है उस पर detailed discussion करना. So we just talk of the essence and the results that we can derive on the basis of Stokes hypothesis. So Stokes hypothesis में there is something known as a mechanical pressure, PM. This is different from in general different from thermodynamic pressure. Why? Because thermodynamic pressure का तो relation ultimately वही है जो आपने मॉलिकुलर और एटॉमिक लेवल पे जो मोमेंटम एक्सचेंजेस हैं वहां से जो प्रेशर कंट्रीब्यूट होकर आता है. लेकिन मैकेनिकल प्रेशर इज सिंपली रिटन एज माइनस ऑफ the three stress components sigma 11 plus sigma 22 plus sigma 33 at a point. तो फ्लूइड में जो भी स्ट्रेसेस हैं नॉर्मल स्ट्रेसेस सिग्मा 11 सिग्मा 22 प्लस सिग्मा 33 कोऑर्डिनेट प्लेन्स पे, जो हम 3 कोऑर्डिनेट प्लेन्स लेकर के स्ट्रेस स्टेट डिफाइन करते हैं. तो हमारे पास 3 नॉर्मल स्ट्रेसेस होते हैं सिग्मा 11 सिग्मा 22 सिग्मा 33. तो उनको ऐड करके उनका अरिथमेटिक मीन लेके माइनस ऑफ दैट. सो दिस इज द मैकेनिकल प्रेशर. नाउ if I substitute this in G.3 dash, because I can substitute this where I can substitute from sigma 11 sigma 22 sigma 33. ये जो इसमें जो स्ट्रेस कंपोनेंट्स आ रहे हैं वो उसको G.3 dash यूज करके सब्स्टिट्यूशन किया है. इसका मतलब यह है कि बेसिकली इस रिलेशन में जो आपके पास लिखी हुई है Pm इज इक्वल टू माइनस सिग्मा 11 प्लस सिग्मा 22 प्लस सिग्मा 33 by 3, I am substituting the values of sigma 11, sigma 22 and sigma 33 from G.3 dash. Substitute from G.3 dash means this. So if you substitute the values of the 3 normal stresses sigma 11, sigma 22, sigma 33, you will have this result minus 1 by 3, and the isotropic part will be summed up 3 times basically, because it will be contributed by 1 and 2 and 3 in an identical manner. उसकी value identical होगी तीनों normal में. So that's why it is just added 3 times. So 3 times minus P plus lambda SKK, और साथ में जो नॉर्मल स्ट्रेसेस में जो म्यू वाला कंपोनेंट है 2 म्यू, और फिर वो SKK. ओके, SKK क्यों? बिकॉज सिग्मा 11 से आएगा 2 म्यू S11, देन सिग्मा 22 से आएगा 2 म्यू S22, और सिग्मा 33 से आएगा 2 म्यू S33. सो इफ आई ऐड आई कैन टेक 2 म्यू आउटसाइड एंड अंदर मेरे पास S11 प्लस S22 प्लस S33. सो दैट सम अगेन आई हैव रिटन एज SKK. And the isotropic part is basically added 3 times. Okay, the same part minus P plus lambda SKK. So now if I collect the terms SKK together, I have this, and finally I have this relation Pm is equal to P minus 3 lambda plus 2 mu SKK by 3. So this is something which Stokes obtained, and from here he started looking at the implications of this relation. So what this relation right now per se, what does it say? It says that the mechanical pressure and the thermodynamic pressure, they are not equal in general, and the difference is due to this term 3 lambda plus 2 mu multiplied by SKK by 3. Okay, so SKK as we know is the volumetric strain rate. तो basically एक volumetric strain rate की वजह से और साथ में 3 lambda plus 2 mu उनके प्रोडक्ट की वजह से डिफरेंस है मैकेनिकल प्रेशर और थर्मोडायनेमिक प्रेशर में. ओके, Now let's complete this story by taking it further. So Stokes assumed that 3 lambda plus 2 mu must be 0. Now why did he assume this? At that time, whatever data was available from experiments, it was known that the difference between mechanical pressure and pressure is hardly noticeable in any kind of an experiment. Okay, so उस टाइम पे हम जब experiments से values निकालते थे mechanical pressure की और thermodynamic pressure की, तो हमें बहुत ही insignificant या ना के बराबर हमें difference मिलता था. ओके चाहे हम लिक्विड्स के साथ डील करें, चाहे हम गैसेस के साथ डील कर रहे थे, हमें यही रिजल्ट हमेशा मिलता था. तो स्टोक्स ट्राइड टू रिकंसाइल his hypothesis on lambda by assuming 3 lambda plus 2 mu as 0, because Stokes argued that volumetric strain rate तो सब सिचुएशन में नेग्लिजिबल नहीं हो सकता है ना. ओनली लेट्स से लिक्विड्स के लिए स्मॉल मान के चलो आप निग्लेक्ट भी कर सकते हो, या इनकम्प्रेसिबल फ्लो में आप निग्लेक्ट कर सकते हो, बट व्हाट अबाउट फ्लोज, कंप्रेसिबल फ्लोज डीलिंग विद गैसेस. ओके, सो ही नॉर्मली, सो उसके लिए जो नॉर्मल चॉइस थी कि भाई हाउ डज पीएम कम आउट टू बी नियरली सेम एज पी. सो Stokes argued that it is always coming out, PM is always coming out nearly same as P, not because of the volumetric strain rate becoming very small or negligible necessarily, but he assumed that it means that 3 lambda plus 2 mu must be 0 for the fluids, Newtonian fluids. तो इसका मतलब Stokes argued that जो आपका second viscosity coefficient है lambda, न्यूटोनियन फ्लूइड्स के लिए उसकी वैल्यू जो है वो -2/3 म्यू होनी चाहिए. अगर ऐसा होगा तो फिर 3 लैम्डा प्लस 2 म्यू मस्ट बी 0 एंड द मैकेनिकल प्रेशर विल ऑलवेज मैच विद द थर्मोडायनेमिक प्रेशर, समथिंग विच इज वेरी मच ट्रू फ्रॉम एक्सपेरिमेंट्स. तो अपनी हाइपोथेसिस को एक्सपेरिमेंट से रिकंसाइल करने के लिए स्टोक्स ने ये अजम्पशन किया, और स्टोक्स का ये अजम्पशन अभी तक वैलिड ही माना जाता है, बिकॉज हमें बहुत ही फ्यू केसेस हैं, एक्सेप्ट जो मैंने यहाँ लिख रखा है कि अगर आप गैसेस के कंप्रेसिबल फ्लोज देख रहे हैं तो उनमें एक फिनोमेना होता है शॉक वेव्स. तो ये सिर्फ आपकी इंफॉर्मेशन के लिए कि शॉक वेव्स में थोड़ा सा देयर आर सम एक्सपेरिमेंट्स व्हिच हैव इंडिकेटेड दैट 3 lambda plus 2 mu is not exactly 0, although the experiments themselves are quite debatable. तो देखा जाए तो कोई बहुत स्ट्रॉन्ग एविडेंस नहीं है experimental which indicates that the mechanical pressure is different from P, whether the volumetric strain rate is negligible or not. So therefore we take it as a good hypothesis, in fact we accept it. तो Stokes की जो hypothesis है वो acceptable है, 3 lambda plus 2 mu. So it means that lambda जो second coefficient था, जो हमें थोड़ा सा bother भी कर रहा था कि भाई दो इसमें विस्कोसिटी कोएफिशिएंट्स इन्वॉल्व हैं न्यूटोनियन फ्लूइड्स की रिलेशन में, तो उसमें जो सेकंड है वो इट इज एक्चुअली -2/3 म्यू इटसेल्फ. ओके, सो इसको बोलते हैं स्टोक्स हाइपोथेसिस, लैम्डा इज -2/3 म्यू. सो इट मींस दैट आई डोंट हैव टू बॉदर अबाउट वैल्यू ऑफ लैम्डा, आई कैन सिंपली चूज इट एज -2/3 म्यू. So I have to deal with only one viscosity coefficient effectively, which is first coefficient of viscosity or dynamic viscosity mu. Okay. So that's what I've written in the end. Stokes hypothesis permits us to work with a single material property mu, okay, which we call as coefficient of viscosity. अब हमने first और second कहना बंद कर दिया. We are dealing with only one. So coefficient of viscosity or dynamic viscosity for Newtonian fluids. Okay. So now finally after introducing the constitutive relations, जब हमने ये इंट्रोड्यूस कर दी G.3 और G.3 अब हम फिर से अपने मॉडल की कंप्लीटनेस को एग्जामिन करना शुरू करते हैं. लेट अस एग्जामिन द बैलेंस ऑफ नंबर ऑफ फ्लो वेरिएबल्स वर्सेस द नंबर ऑफ इक्वेशंस. तो अब हमारे पास इक्वेशंस बढ़ गए हैं G.1, G.2, G.3. नाउ यू कैन काउंट देम हियर. How many flow variables are occurring in these three equations? Okay, G.1, G.2 and G.3. Well, these are the flow variables. Rho है, which is 1, velocity, which is 3, then of course the stress, viscous stress now, because I have split it into a pressure part and a viscous stress part. So there are viscous stresses which are 6 in number, and there is a hydrostatic or स्टेशनरी या यूनिफॉर्म मोशन का फ्लूइड का आइसोट्रॉपिक, सो दैट इज प्रेशर. सो that introduces one more extra variable. So density, velocity, sigma v tensor, t, all these count as 1 plus 3 plus 6 plus 1. So if it effectively makes it 11 variables now, up till now. और फिर मैंने ये भी दिखाया आपको कि because आप G.3 को देख रहे होंगे, तो G.3 के अंदर कौन कौन से नए अननोन आ गए, उसमें एक विस्कोसिटी भी एक आ गया है जिसको अभी हम कांस्टेंट की तरह नहीं देख रहे हैं. ओके, सो वी ट्रीट इट एज अ फ्लो वेरिएबल्स. वी विल गिव यू द आर्गुमेंट फॉर दैट, क्यों हम ऐसा कर रहे हैं. फॉर द टाइम बीइंग डोंट ट्रीट इट एज अ कांस्टेंट. ओके, जस्ट लाइक एनी अदर प्रॉपर्टी ऑफ द फ्लो, जैसे डेंसिटी है, विस्कोसिटी वगैरह को भी प्रॉपर्टी की तरह लीजिए फ्लो की. So not treat it as a constant. So mu is added as a new more variable. So 11 के बाद 12 हो गए. और फिर मैंने आगे एक टेम्परेचर भी लिखा हुआ है. Why? Because normally it is known that mu is a property of fluid, but depends on काय पे डिपेंड करती है. ये आपने सेकेंड ईयर के कोर्स में भी पढ़ा होगा कि विस्कोसिटी जो है वो ठीक है, एक प्रॉपर्टी है फ्लूइड की, बट इट डज डिपेंड ऑन टेम्परेचर एंड प्रेशर. आपने FM वाइट में पीछे चार्ट्स भी देखे होंगे जहां पे एयर की या वाटर की विस्कोसिटी टेम्परेचर के साथ चेंज होती हुई दिख रही होगी. सो इफ यू रिमेंबर दोस चार्ट्स, तो आप देखेंगे कि ये दोनों पे डिपेंड करती है. बट ये बात भी ठीक है, दिस इज राइट, दैट विस्कोसिटी इज अ स्ट्रॉन्ग फंक्शन ऑफ टेम्परेचर एंड ओनली अ वेरी वीक फंक्शन ऑफ प्रेशर. तो थोड़ी देर के लिए अगर आप ये मान लें कि प्रेशर का डिपेंडेंसी नहीं भी है, उसको इग्नोर कर दें, वीक डिपेंडेंसी, recognizing that it's a weak dependency, then we can say that mu is dependent on temperature. So अगर आप mu को वेरिएबल ले रहे हैं तो फिर that naturally implies that mu क्यों वेरी हो रहा होगा. Why mu would be varying? Must be because of variation in temperature. So it means temperature is also to be taken as a variable. So that's why all those variables are introduced as extra. Okay, डैश लाइन लगा के. सो टोटल वेरिएबल्स मेरे पास 13 हो गए. इस तरह से टोटल नंबर ऑफ फ्लो वेरिएबल्स इन अ जनरल विस्कस फ्लो 13 हो गए. तो ये सारे फ्लो वेरिएबल्स कहां से आए हैं? G.1, G.2 और G.3 को इक्वेशंस को देखते हुए. इन इक्वेशंस में 13 फ्लो वेरिएबल्स आ गए. ओके, नाउ लेट अस काउंट द नंबर ऑफ इक्वेशंस. तो G.1 एक इक्वेशन है, G.2 वेक्टर इक्वेशन, 3 G.3 इज अ टेंसर रिलेशन, सो इट विल इन्वॉल्व 6 इंडिपेंडेंट इक्वेशंस, क्योंकि सिमेट्री है स्ट्रेस टेंसर में, स्ट्रेनडेड टेंसर में, सो दैट्स व्हाई ओनली 6. So 6, 1 plus 3 plus 6, it makes it 10. Then I have so 10 equations है मेरे पास, और variables in 10 equations में 13 है. Okay, so keep this in mind. So that means अभी भी situation जो है वो it has not ended. We are not ending up with a complete mathematical model, है ना. We are always ending up with a partial mathematical model if I only use these G.1, G.2 and G.3. The model is not complete. So ये जो 10 मेरे पास equations हैं, अब मुझे 3 और equation चाहिए, तो मैं ऐड कर सकता हूं. For example, because I have included temperature as a variable, so I can add my energy equation और first law of thermodynamics, thermal energy equation मैं बना सकता हूं using first law of thermodynamics. तो जो कि आप हीट ट्रांसफर के कोर्सेज में देखेंगे. तो अगर मैं उसको ऐड कर लेता हूं तो एक इक्वेशन मेरे पास और आ जाएगी. तो 10 से मैं 11 पे आ जाऊंगा. पर 11 के बाद मुझे फिर बेसिक क्लासिकल फिजिक्स की कोई ऐसी लॉज समझ में नहीं आती हैं जो मैं यूज कर सकता हूं. ओके, क्लासिकल फिजिक्स की, मैकेनिक्स से रिलेटेड कोई और प्रिंसिपल अब नहीं बचता. फर्स्ट लॉ को अगर आपने यूज कर लिया तो इक्वेशन बनाने के लिए कोई और फिजिकल प्रिंसिपल नहीं है. तो इट मींस आई एम स्टक विद 11 इक्वेशंस फ्रॉम बेसिक फिजिकल प्रिंसिपल्स. तो अब मेरे पास क्या चॉइस है कि अब मैं थर्मोडायनेमिक स्टेट इक्वेशंस, let me take the help of thermodynamic state relations. तो state relations क्या होती हैं? They are relations between properties of a system. Okay, तो in our case our system is the particle. Okay, तो particle की जो different properties हैं उनको relate करने की equation state में लिख सकता हूं. So for example, अगर मैं ideal gas से deal कर रहा हूं, I can write down a relation that density is pressure over RT. Okay, तो ये एक स्टेट रिलेशन है. बट इन जनरल कैसा भी हमारे पास प्योर सब्सटेंस है, चाहे वो लिक्विड है, चाहे वो गैस है, कुछ भी है, वी नो दैट डेंसिटी इज अ फंक्शन ऑफ टेम्परेचर एंड प्रेशर. तो मैं एक इक्वेशन ऑफ स्टेट डेंसिटी की ले सकता हूं, राइट. Then I can also take state relation for viscosity. Okay, viscosity is also a property, so it can be related to temperature and pressure through some state relations. तो ये दो state relations मैं और ऐड कर सकता हूँ. So this will be a happy situation. फिर मेरे पास total number of equations 13 हो जाएंगे, right? So let me have a look at this now. So if I add energy equation, it is interesting for you to know that the energy equation throws up two more unknowns. Okay, so there are two more unknowns which are thrown by the energy equation. What are them? Thermal conductivity and specific heat at constant volume CV. तो अब जब एक मैंने एडिशनल इक्वेशन यूज कर लिया है विच इज एनर्जी इक्वेशन और दो इक्वेशन ऑफ स्टेट, तो मेरे पास 13 इक्वेशन हो गए थे, पर मेरे पास दो नए और वेरिएबल आ गए. सो दिस टेक्स माय वेरिएबल टैली टू 15 नाउ. 13 से दो आगे बढ़ गए हम. तो अब अगर 15 हो गए तो अब भी मेरे पास इक्वेशन 13 है. तो नंबर ऑफ इक्वेशंस आर 13, 11 फिजिकल लॉज प्लस 2 इक्वेशन ऑफ स्टेट. सो देयरफॉर आई कंटिन्यू विद टू मोर एडिशनल इक्वेशंस ऑफ स्टेट, है ना. मैं अब दो एडिशनल इक्वेशंस ऑफ स्टेट ले सकता हूं, which are thermal conductivity as function of temperature and pressure and specific heat at constant volume, again a function of temperature and pressure. अगर मैं इन दो additional equation state को और ऐड कर लेता हूं तो तब मेरे पास जाकर के एक complete mathematical model बनेगा, mathematical model of a general viscous flow. और ये कहां पे जाके बैलेंस हुआ है? 15 variables and 15 equations. Okay, तो इस 15 वेरिएबल्स और 15 इक्वेशंस में अगर आप 15 इक्वेशंस देखें तो 11 तो इसमें सॉर्ट ऑफ फिजिकल लॉज हैं. 11 कौन सी हैं? आपका मास, लीनियर मोमेंटम, फर्स्ट लॉ ऑफ थर्मोडायनेमिक्स एंड, तो ये कितने हो गए? एक आपका मास का हो गया, लीनियर मोमेंटम के 3 हो गए, फिर आपके जो आपका वो है कॉन्स्टिट्यूटिव रिलेशंस हैं वो 6 हैं, तो 10 ये हो गए. और फिर आपका एक और कौन सा रिलेशन हमने यूज किया था? एनर्जी का, फर्स्ट लॉ ऑफ थर्मोडायनेमिक्स. तो आपके 6 + 5 11 हो गए. ये 6 तो आपके कॉन्स्टिट्यूटिव लॉ से आ गए, एक आपका फर्स्ट लॉ से आ गया, 3 आपके लीनियर मोमेंटम इक्वेशन हो गए और एक आपका लॉ ऑफ मास कंजर्वेशन. तो बेसिक फिजिकल लॉज आपकी 5 हैं, इक्वेशन दे रही है, और 6 आपके कॉन्स्टिट्यूटिव इक्वेशंस, तो 11 फिजिकल लॉज हो गई. और फिर बाकी जितना भी एक्स्ट्रा आपको रिक्वायर्ड है वो आप इक्वेशन स्टेट से यू ट्राई टू कंप्लीट योर मैथमेटिकल मॉडल. तो ये पिक्चर बताने का मतलब ये था कि जनरल विस्कस फ्लो जो है उसका जो मैथमेटिकल मॉडल है जनरल विस्कस फ्लो का, वो it's a quite involved model. Okay, it contains as many as 15 variables and you therefore require 15 equations. और कहां से आते हैं ये इक्वेशंस वो भी I have already told you. Okay, so now इसको यहीं पे एंड कर रहे हैं अब हम, and now we would like to move on with a very basic and very slightly more simplified mathematical model. और वो वही है जो मैंने पहले भी आपको डिफाइन किया है और कई बार बताया भी है. द मोस्ट कॉमनली एम्प्लॉयड विस्कस फ्लो मॉडल विच इज इनकम्प्रेसिबल, होमोजेनस एंड कांस्टेंट प्रॉपर्टी मॉडल. तो इस मॉडल के बारे में आगे आने वाले लेक्चर में बात करेंगे कि इसमें वेरिएबल्स हमारे कितने कम हो जाते हैं 15 से, और इसमें हमें इक्वेशंस कितने चाहिए. ओके, सो लेट अस ट्राई टू end this lecture right here. Okay, so incompressible flow से जो हमारी कंडीशन है वो पता है आपको कि velocity should be divergence free. Homogeneous का मतलब है density is just a number or a constant in the entire flow domain for all times. Space time दोनों में constant है. और जो आपका कांस्टेंट प्रॉपर्टी जो वर्ड मैंने ऐड किया है उससे मीनिंग मेरा ये कि मैं विस्कोसिटी, थर्मल कंडक्टिविटी और स्पेसिफिक हीट, ये सब प्रॉपर्टीज जो हैं विच आर थर्मोफिजिकल एंड ट्रांसपोर्ट प्रॉपर्टीज यू कैन से, इनका नाम जेनरिक किए है. सो एनीवे, विस्कोसिटी, थर्मल कंडक्टिविटी, स्पेसिफिक हीट, ऑल दीज आर ट्रीटेड एज कांस्टेंट इन द फ्लो. तो नाइदर दे डिपेंड ऑन any spatial location nor time, so they are simply some numbers mu naught, k naught and cv naught. So ये जो मॉडल होगा इसमें obviously variables कम हो जाएंगे और naturally the number of equations will be reduced. So when we will start the lecture number 11, we will begin with this model and start considering its equations and how we can finally arrive at the rather celebrated and famous Navier-Stokes इक्वेशंस। सो नेवियर स्टोक्स इक्वेशंस क्या है वो अनफोल्ड हो जाएंगे आपको लेक्चर नंबर 11 में। थैंक यू वेरी मच।